Alright. It is 5:32 on December 19th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Let me share the screen for that. All right, and we do have a quorum. I get a motion to approve the agenda, or does anyone want to make any changes to it?
So moved. I'll second.
All right, motions have been made to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next item under a regular agenda would be the approval of the 2025 operating budget. And well, if that's the one you want me to, Karen, would you like to take control, or do you want me to share my screen?
I can take
Yeah.
control.
Okay, let's do that then. I'll stop sharing. You can go ahead and share.
All right, can you see my screen? All
We can see it.
right, great. Okay, so let's just start at the top. As far as donations go, for 2025.
Can you make it any larger?
I'm sorry?
Can you make it any larger?
Is that better?
A little bit.
A little bit, okay.
Yeah. Let's see, I can take that
Oh,
down.
that helps. Yeah.
Remove that. All right, I think you're good.
Okay. All right, so let's just start at the top. As far as donations go, we are planning on doing more fundraisers to increase donations, but we also wanted to kind of keep donations in line with this year's actuals. So it's kind of like a let's beat this year's actuals, essentially. We do it's the same thing with the foundation, like Douglas County Community Foundation, and other foundation funding. I know that we're going to try to do some more community outreach, find more foundations to want to donate to our cause. So I've increased that by about double-ish for the foundation funding other. But then in terms of grants and the grants, we would like to ask the city for $3.5 million to kind of just get us started on kind of moving everything into motion that we're promising to increase services to more people. We've got pallet coming up. That funding has been amended for 2024, and we did receive that extra $700,000 check this week. So that's not included in this funding, and it's not included in it is included in the actuals because I did make sure to reflect that. I got Douglas County updated, and then ESG grant where we've already been awarded the $56,500 for 2025 funding, or 2024 through 2025. And we've talked to the city about getting some like remainder COVID funding of about $100,000 to make some additional facility improvements. So I've included that in our proposed 2025 funding of about $100,000. Then the grants other. We've already submitted a grant for funding of the step-up beds to provide some more privacy for our guest. Privacy and security, I guess. And so we've got that figured in, and then also have some goals for additional grant requests and funding for 2025. Does anybody have any questions about funding?
Any questions about the revenue side?
Well, I guess I certainly have concerns about how much we're gonna rely on some of these increases that we don't know if they're going to pan out. And I think about that in relation to some of the, the donation amounts, whether it's, there's a pretty good expanse there in what we're looking for on fundraisers and donations and what we've experienced in the past. Now, I don't have a whole lot of background in that to know how easy those things can be ramped up and successful, or if it's kind of a slow build process. The one perspective I guess I do have is looking from what I'm going to call a community economic perspective, in the sense that, we haven't had sales growth in Lawrence for the last 1.5 or 2 years, meaning people aren't spending more money. And, that's coming into play in what I see in my businesses, where we've actually got 2 measures: one, customer count, and then sales. We're seeing customer counts that are up and sales that are down. So that's an indicator that people are trying not to spend money that they may have in the past. And that's, that when I see those sort of patterns happening in our community, I do wonder about if we're overly exuberant in expectation of fundraisers and donations. But as long as we're aware of that, and we've got the wherewithal to say, okay, we're not achieving those revenue marks that we were hoping, and where do we look to achieve some savings? I, of course, was going to advocate that we achieve the savings in the workers' comp payment, but apparently that was misguided.
So if you look at the projections for 2024, the column G, and then look at the proposed for the 2025 budget, it does look like for donations, it's pretty close to being in line. Like, I appreciate that that was changed from when we saw the first draft last month.
Right.
But then when they go down to the next section under events and fundraisers, that's almost like totally new. We don't project any of this revenue for current year. So we are kind of, to your point, I think, we're assuming that we can pull up the $30,000, increase in that sort of revenue, which we have not accomplished. Even going back, looking at the actuals from 2022 and 2023. If you scroll down just a little bit more.
Oh, scroll
Aaron,
down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a little, there you go. So then the next, no, go up just a little tad.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. So then the next section under foundation funding, the projected for this year is around 52,000. We're proposing next year, double that.
Mhm.
So it feels like there's 50 some thousand there, there's 30,000 in the previous section. And then under the last section, under grants, there's some pretty big changes between what's projected for this year and what we propose for next year. It sounds like the CDBG thing, there's been discussion with the city, so I don't think that one's worrisome, but the grants other, that's like a tremendous increase. So from getting a projection for this year of 7,000 to saying next year, we're thinking we're gonna get 171, that feels to me pretty significant. And I guess I'm curious, like what's giving you the confidence that that's possible? Or is the expense related to this essentially offsetting this? If it doesn't come through, then we won't incur the expense. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, are some of the things that are perhaps conditional on the revenue side kind of matched on the expense side? Like, we're not gonna be spending money if we don't get it. So is that 171 something we shouldn't really be thinking about? Because
you want me to, I can answer that question, Charlie. So we've applied, the city has hired a grant writer. We've been working with them. And one of the grants that we were believing that we were gonna get, something about our financials wasn't in line, but they encouraged us to apply again. I don't think we had our audit in time or something like that. And we know we're gonna have one done this time, and we believe that that will be successful. That person has not stopped trying. She submitted another grant, and they're pretty confident that they can find a grant that's going to be willing to fund us with that 100,000. So we have a professional grant writer on board that's going to be writing grants and not giving up until we meet that goal to get those step-up bids. So I'm kind of confident that we can find the funding in the grants that are out there, that she's identified, and some that Karen is going to be identifying. Karen has come on board full-time, and her position has gone from financial director of finance, and we've added the title of grant writer. What grant manager? Did I say grant manager? So
grants management.
So Karen's going to be doing that too, looking for grants and applying for grants, and we're going to actively and proactively work on applying for more grants to meet some of these goals. So I'm pretty confident, coming from the grant world, that there are grants out there, and if we have somebody diligently applying for those grants, we will be successful. Some of the successes that we're doing now with our programming, we are going to be able to qualify for a lot of the grants, and we're going to actively be looking for those grants, something we didn't actively do this year. I believe that once we do that, we will be successful in finding grants. There's money out there. We just have to find it and apply for it and adjust what we're doing to meet the requirements for those grants. So I'm confident that we can find that money this year. The other part of that was 100,000. What else is in there? Karen, let me scroll down on my page.
Oh, did you want to talk about ESG?
Well, we've got that, but we're going to apply for more ESG funding also.
For that
ESG
grants other, you mentioned 100,000, but
that's what I was looking to see.
It says 171, so they're.
So let me speak to that, because so James just mentioned that we attempted to apply for one grant, but we didn't have all of the requirements. I believe after we get our 2024 audit done, which again, we'll need to have our 2024 audit done by April 1st. So next week we'll be hitting the ground running full time, trying to get all my audit materials ready that I can get ready until the end of the year, so that we can get that audit started as soon as possible. Once we get that, we'll be able to apply for the first grant that we were attempting. But the second grant that we have applied to already, we should be hearing back in probably February. And I believe those funds are about $50,000. So the first grant that we tried to, but we didn't qualify for because of some of the requirements that were in there, I believe we'll be meeting those requirements after the 2024 audit is completed. And that was for $100,000. And then this grant that we've submitted for already is, I believe, $50,000.
Okay.
And Karen spoke about ESG. when I started, we had ESG, but we didn't have a team. The staff wasn't trained on how to actually provide the ESG services. And now we have a fully trained staff. All of our case managers are trained in what ESG is and what it's eligible for. We have a dedicated case manager to do wrap rehousing. So I believe we can expend our funding and actually apply for additional funding, because I used to manage that grant. And I know there's some times where there's funding available later in that year to get additional funding. I think we should be able to qualify for that. The thing we spoke about earlier about the CDBG, it was actually, I think it's more CV funding. I think it's the last of the CV funding for CDBG that the city reached out to us, and they were working behind the scenes to get additional $100,000 for shelter improvements for us to be able to expend that. So they approached us with that, and we're identifying improvement projects that we could submit to be eligible for that funding. So that's why I think that is going to be a go, because they have to expend the funds and they want us to improve some of the things in the shelter that we haven't done yet. We're also looking at it's in another line item. It's the professional. What is it called? Professional.
Oh, professional
We
development.
haven't got to expenses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's part of, we're hiring somebody to work as community engagement and public relations, and they will be developing fundraising ideals, and we'll have put together a team to actually work on fundraising. That's something we didn't do in 2024. So that's kind of why we're confident about actually getting some fundraising money coming in. We're getting a start on it early. We've talked about that in our exec teams meetings. We're doing some programming to be able to report in these grants, actually the programming. We're doing a better job of logging in-kind donations and provisions, how we're providing those in-kind donations to our guests. So we're having the data to back that up. We're having a dedicated person to do data management and data input, and that's all she's gonna do is work on our data. They're gonna be our data guru. So we have the data we give will be consistent with all of our programs that come from one source, and it'll be one person making sure that those numbers match. So when we report, we'll have a better way of reporting what we're doing on these grants, and we'll be confident that our numbers are what they should be. So that's some, I know it's pretty optimistic, but for me, optimism comes from in 2024, we didn't do anything. And now we have a plan to do something in 2025. So that's why I'm kind of optimistic that we're going to receive some. And it was said, I don't know if we're going to reach that goal. We have another goal. I'm not going to talk about it in this meeting. It'll be more in early in 2025. But I think we're putting together a plan that we're going to actually see numbers more than we have seen. As far as the donations, right now, I don't have a donation report for this quarter yet because we're in transition right now. We're learning the systems and learning how to actually get the data we want to report on. But what I've been told is that we're seeing a lot of new donors. When Chuck said that there's money not being spent, we're getting new donors. I've been working from home because of an illness. But when I got back in, there was a letter for me. There was a check for $500. They appreciate what we're doing. And then when it was logged into the system, they said this was a first-time donor. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I think some of the things we're doing, some people are taking notice and they like the direction. So I'm kind of optimistic. I'm not overly optimistic. I'm kind of realistically optimistic about the plan that we're putting together to really address these things that we hadn't addressed in 2024.
All right. Thanks, James.
I'm good with James' realistic optimism. That's
all right.
He
then there's a reason.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck.
Any other questions about the revenue? We want to move down to expenditures. Karen, if you want to take us down through the expenses.
All right. Before we get down too far, the first line of our expenses is our liability on the building, and Oh my goodness. There's been some back and forth with the city. We've gotten ironed out. I know what we have paid in interest. I know where we stand with our building loan. And so for 2025, I anticipate that we'll be making $15,550 in principal payments. And for loan interest, $6,700. So about $22,000 for the building loan. That was something that community member had expressed some concern with on our part. That was something that I was concerned with also because I wasn't clearly understanding what was happening with that in terms of the billing. But we did get that straightened out with the city. Like I said, I got the new amortization schedule. I know we're on the same page, and that was what was really important to me. I've submitted some journal entries for Kindred to make so that when we do get our financial statements, that's reflected accurately and it matches our new updated amortization statement. Okay, so direct assistance. We, for 2024, there's some of these categories that we just haven't hit our anticipated spending. So like the clothing and the medical and ID. So I've kind of kept clothing and work-related items the same budget just so that we can give our guests an opportunity, or opportunities, I should say, to get what they need in order to get themselves into a more permanent situation. Medical wise, I increased that a bit too. We haven't spent too much there, but I do think, again, staffing wise this year has been, we now have more stability. So we're able to provide more case management and just provide better services. So I've increased that to 3,000 this year. Same with IDs. That's something that's been really big, just trying to get people able to have identification or be able to obtain identification, because that's, you kind of need birth certificate to get an ID or a driver's license or whatever. So I see a lot of requests for those come in. The costs aren't that great, but again, because we're increasing services, I wanted to make sure that we had enough there to ensure that we can help as many guests as possible. Same with transportation and housing assistance. I've categorized this year with ESG funding as like applications. That's kind of where that lands. And then rental assistance and utility assistance, all of that will be reimbursed by the ESG funds, but we want to be able to provide more if we can. So I've increased that. I've either increased it or I've kept it kind of in line with what happened this year. And so increases in security deposits and rental arrears, and then just kind of miscellaneous things. I know recently we paid for a U-Haul to help someone get moved in. So so that increased from 2024's budget from 42,500 to 65,000 for 2025. Does anybody have any questions on this section?
So this section includes both like ESG funds and like unencumbered funds?
Yes.
So can you give me an example of how we would be paying rental arrears? Because, I mean, obviously our clients aren't still renting.
Right.
We I
ahead,
can
James.
answer that. Yeah, so under ESG, the qualification for rapid rehousing funding, which includes, the best way to put it is everything that someone needs in order to be housed, which includes arrears and rental arrears. It includes utility arrears. And so that's what we're doing. So anybody that is unable to move into somewhere because they have arrears on the books, like with utility companies or things like that. If people are moving into public housing and they have arrears, so they're not eligible for public housing, and that's the best option for them based on their income, we can pay those arrears. And it's based on a case management. If anybody has any rental arrears that they identify, it's better to pay that off than to start them off in a new, maybe it's a private rental and it's not public housing, and then they get their check garnished or something like that. So if it's gonna make them more amenable to stay housed, we pay that off. We try to get somebody as close to zero in their rental history as we can with these funds, so they don't have that to hamper their ability to move forward. So that's how we use rental arrears, and all that's eligible under ESG.
Perfect.
I think just a quick add to what you have said, James, is when you think about it, at least it's been a while since I've rented, but I know they run a credit report. So if you've got that on your credit report, they're likely going to get rejected. So we want to give them the best possible chance to be able to get housed permanently. So I think that's how that gets encompassed.
Any other questions on this section? Okay,
All right, so facility. Equipment purchase, I've zeroed out. We've had budgeted $10,000. I've zeroed it out because there's a $2,500 safe harbor rule with the IRS. Anything under $2,500 can be expensed. So when you think about it these days, the majority of our computers are going to be less than that amount. And so those can fall into perhaps computer internet IT. If there's, I think we bought a refrigerator for $2,200. We're not going to be depreciating those items, and it didn't make sense for us to keep that line. So rather than keep that line, I've split it amongst the other lines. For gasoline, I've increased. Well, we had a lot budgeted for 2024, but more in line for 2025. I wanted to increase it just some to $2,500 because I think that's a little bit more realistic. I don't know how much gasoline we'll need to have to courier people between places. I don't know how much we do that, but for 2025, I think 2,500 is realistic. The other thing that I want to mention about that is we recently obtained an account with WEX. They service Quick Trip's gas accounts or fuel accounts. So we have a $500 limit there. And the cards can be used by any of the drivers. They've got their own PIN numbers and everything like that. So, and that gets paid on a monthly basis. And again, I think that's realistic amount. We've not spent more than $200 a month in gasoline. Vehicle expense. James had mentioned that we might need to make some more repairs on our vehicles because they are getting older. So we want to make sure that they're maintained in good working conditions so that we don't have a gap in being able to provide services for people. And travel mileage too. This is increased slightly to capture more travel. What we anticipate is spending more on staff development, which will be in a future section that we discuss. So just making sure that we capture the mileage, especially if we have our DSAs and our case managers traveling to guests to check up on them, make sure that they have what they need, going between the village and the shelter. If they're using their personal vehicles, that they get reimbursed for their mileage back and forth there. General supplies, I kept close to what this year has been. I'd say one of our biggest expenses is toilet paper for the village. Making sure that we have septic safe toilet paper for the village so that we're not having repair or plumbing people come out every so often. And then just also making sure that we have other supplies on hand. That way we're not scrambling to get them at the last minute, which also would encompass having somebody get sent out with their personal vehicle to obtain supplies. We don't want to be in a situation like that. And I think our staff has done a really good job at making sure that we have all the supplies we need without scrambling at the last minute, making phone calls to management to make sure or to ask permission to purchase things. So that's more in line with what we have now. Same with kitchen supplies. Groceries have increased slightly by about $7,000. I'm actually surprised because we've been doing 3 meals a day since June. And I thought that our expenses would go up higher, but they've been pretty consistent month to month. So I've kept it at 150 just to make sure that we have enough groceries on hand we have the ability to make sure that everyone gets fed 3 meals a day. I know we're going to have day programming because of winter shelter. And so folks that are staying at the shelter for day programming will also get a third meal. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Repairs and maintenance are woes here. Just making sure that the shelter is in good operating condition. We've had hot water water heater problems. We've also had problems with our coolers and just making sure that those things are in good working order so that we can function. Service fees, I anticipate to be similar to where they're at now, possibly less. I've increased the utilities, decreased, actually, no, I've increased the computer, internet, and IT. We are wanting to do the Microsoft conversion. Right now, we are on Google Workspace. And we also have a few computers and some other hardware that desperately need to be upgraded. We got some information from MCube saying that we've got some really old computers that will not be able to get upgraded to the new operating system. So we do plan to spend some money upgrading our IT equipment and computers and getting Microsoft Office, because I don't know if you've heard me complain about Google Workspace before, but I'm not a fan. So anyway, I think the expense is going to be high because of transitioning, making sure that all of our data gets migrated from Google Workspace into OneDrive and Microsoft, and making sure that we just have everything that we need. Telephone should be approximately the same, and then facility other just kind of captures everything else that isn't within the other categories. Does anybody have any questions on this section? Nope. Okay.
If we were to get those step-up beds, where would you capture that expense?
So step-up beds, we will want to put that on the balance sheet as an asset, because we're making one large purchase. And so then technically that would be over the $2,500 threshold. So then on this budget, it would be captured in the depreciation expense, which, by the way, Chuck, I appreciate you being very insistent on getting depreciation expense on our budget. It is on our budget. It's the very last line. And I've tried to capture what I believe we will be spending in depreciation expense in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We'll do program and fundraising together. So program expenses, these have largely been Indeed and TransUnion background expenses. I don't anticipate that we'll have those anymore now that we're going with Accept PEO, and they have the ability to be able to do background checks and some of the other programmatic things that we've been capturing in terms of HR hiring. Fundraising, credit card processing fees, I estimate that they'll go up just slightly because we are trying to raise some more money. And fundraising other, I kept it low because I don't know how much we'll need for fundraising. But it's one of those, I think perhaps they'll get captured in other professional services when we have a strategic development and public relations person. So I will have better insight onto what maybe that should be. And of course, if there's any budgetary changes, we'll be bringing it to the board. Does anybody have any questions on these two sections? Okay. This last section, admin. Bank fees I have increased. One of the things that, a couple of things that I have going on is I'm wanting to get the bank more involved with how we're preventing fraud. We had another fraud situation come up this week. Thankfully, our staff has been exercising a lot of caution when it comes to those donation checks. And so we got another one of those last week. But I'm also wanting to make sure that on the back end, when it relates to our count, that any handwritten checks that we're writing, we have the ability to make sure that they are going to the entity that we've written the check to, and having the ability to stop it without having to pay an extra stop payment fee. So that will cost an extra $35 a month. I've talked with Treasury Management at Bank Midwest, and we're possibly looking at doing some more maybe ACHs, but that's something that the exec team at the shelter will discuss further. I don't think we have too many vendors that will want ACH, and so it probably will not be in our best interest to go that route because it costs $15 a month plus a per transaction fee. So I don't want to go in that direction necessarily, but if it ends up being advantageous to us and saves time and all of that, that's something that I think we could explore in the future. The next thing is insurance. So last year for 2024, we had 30,000 budgeted for commercial property and then 5,000 for like general and other. I just combined them in that general and other. Everything is encapsulated in that general and other. It's just insurance, like property insurance and the officers, liability, auto, all of that. So I have that at 55,000, which kind of I feel like should be at that level based on our workers' comp. We'll talk about health insurance first. The health insurance is going up a little bit because it's going up for everybody. But based on what I know and my projections from our payroll, I've estimated it to be $235,000 for 2025. And then workers' compensation has been a very, very huge topic of discussion. The workers' comp rate with Accent is 3.38% of gross payroll. Our gross payroll that we're estimating for 2025 is $2.7 million. That includes everyone having a 50-cent per hour raise or increase, and that also includes salaried people. So if they're on salary, I split out what they would be making hourly and then added 50 cents and then put it back in an annualized format. So everybody is getting 50-cent raise. So, and I've talked extensively with Steve Donovan, the director of Accent's risk management. And so I got a little insight onto that. We will have a couple of people that can be categorized as clerical. So the risk calculation is lower. And he said that we'll maybe save about $6,000. That's captured in this $90,000 because when you do the calculation for the 2.7, I think it came out to be like 93,000. So I put it at 90,000 just as a good medium point. But yeah, the most of our employees are going to be captured in that group homes code with the rate at 3.38% of payroll. Accent's going to be continually auditing our payroll. So as they bill us based on our payroll, they will also be billing workers' comp based on those payrolls as well. So it's not just a number that they've calculated for the year and that's what they're billing us. It'll be based on each biweekly payroll at 3.38%.
So I have a question about health insurance.
Okay.
Because you kind of glossed over it, that there was an increase, but it's a 43% increase. What I don't understand is that projected a significant increase in people taking it, adding more employees for the new pallet? Because otherwise, if it's straight across, that's an excessive increase.
What we found out, Shannon, was that the increase that we're seeing is less than the increase would be if we stayed where we were. And I have those numbers for you. The percentage of staff that chose medical insurance is at 76.9. That's up from 63.4. Dental is at 84.6. That's up from 68.3, and vision is at 76.9. That's up from 63.4. So we have more people partaking in the health insurance, but we did make sure when we compare the prices that we're not just because we got access and they're providing the health insurance. We wanted to make sure that we're seeing a savings based on what we would have been paying if we'd stayed, and we compared the increases. And we did that when before we stopped our increases, we had them give us a quote for the next year, and the quote they gave us, we compared it to what we're going to be paying now. So we did that. One other thing I want to say is when Karen talked about that 50 cent, we did that based on the contract, because we agreed with the bargaining unit that we would provide 50 cent for everybody in 2025 and 50 cent for everybody in 2026. So I just
Okay,
wanted
but
to say
let me
that.
ask you a question about that.
Okay.
How many are new hires who have been here less than a year?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's I don't have that number, but I can get it.
Because does your handbook say, like, after you've been here a year, you're gonna get a raise? Because,
What does the contract say?
I don't know that the contract really I think when you're talking about a raise, right?
But the way they do the pay rates, it's based on the position. So those positions will get paid 50 cents more.
You think that is a good idea for keeping people, like, if you've been there 5 years?
It does. I think I hear what you're saying, but it's an agreement and we signed it. But it was based on funding available, and if we get the funding, we can do it.
I think, and I cannot remember the meeting, but I don't necessarily think it would be unreasonable to be like, everybody who's been here more than a year, who got the first jump, who we brought up from a ridiculously low wage.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the issue is their practice has been to pay everybody the same rate. There's not
There's no, you did a good job, there's no, you've been here long enough to get a raise. Well, we can change the handbook to whatever we wanna say.
I think the agreement probably doesn't give us that flexibility. It'd be worth looking into, I suppose.
I just think $300,000 is a huge number, and I would not be in favor of granting these raises until we know we have the money. Right? Like, I don't know when we'll know from the city. I don't know, but
our budget is always a proposed budget, and I think what we have to do is come up with one, and then based on what we are getting, we have to change. If we get everything we expected, everything we put in here, we can go. But if we don't, we go back and refine it based on the funding that we have coming in, and our significant funding. What's questionable is the funding from the city. I think the county funding is static. It hasn't changed. So I think we do have to come back once we meet and negotiate with the city. That's where we have to change. This is a proposed budget. I hear what you're saying about the raises also, but when I think we talked about this before. It's almost like, there's some good things and bad things about having an agreement. If we would have had in there something in our handbook about the way raises were negotiated and the union saw that, I'm sure they would have negotiated against or advocated for what they wanted. And so based on what was in the handbook agreement at the time, they picked from that handbook and said, we're okay with everything, but these things we're bargaining on. And so once we bargain on, once we make that agreement, that's where we're agreeing to do our best to meet that agreement. But when it comes to raises, that's based on funding. So if we don't get the funding, we can't honor that. And so therefore we don't have to, because in there's a provision that said based on funding available, but we have to have a good faith effort to ask for that funding because that's what we agreed to do.
So when, I know we finished the negotiations, what, March timeframe? When did the last round of raises? Was it April?
Yeah. The agreement, their first paycheck in May.
So then I would
Yes,
say
when they
we
got the
don't
new
do
raise.
it till the same time we did the last raise. Right?
That's not what we agreed to. We didn't agree to that.
Well.
Yeah, I think the agreement shows that the pay would go up in January.
That's how I remember it too. I'm
Yeah.
trying to pull it up right
Yeah, I
now.
don't have it,
Yeah.
but,
It's in
mean-
there. No, that's what it says. It says that.
well, and you can't give it unless you get it, and,
Right, they know that. They know that.
I mean,
But and I think I hear what you're saying, and I think we were taking notes and we're making sure that when we negotiate next time, all our reservations will go into our negotiation for next time. There's several things that I think we want to talk about and to discuss, but I think we can have some of these discussions in our executive team meeting because it's an agreement. We signed it. There's nothing we can do now to change that. And what we have to do is have the good faith to ask for it. If we don't get it, we don't get it. And that's a different story. That's a different
yeah,
story.
I'm just saying, it's
I
one of the
I know.
biggest numbers on here, and it will make us upside down.
Yeah.
If,
When are you expecting the contract with the city to be available?
I'm not sure, but once we get our budget together, I think we meet with Misty to do that.
Okay.
So it'll be soon. I think soon.
Okay. Any other questions about the admin expenses?
I did want to mention that as part of the bargaining unit agreement, we did need to also incorporate the 401k contributions for employees who've been at the shelter for more than 3 years. So I budgeted about $15,000 for that. It's not an expense that we had before because it's not a benefit that we've offered before. I kept accounting and legal fees about 30,000. Other professional services are high because we are, I'm gonna code the accent admin fees there. But we're also looking to contract out the strategic development and public relations spot. And so someone with the experience that we need in order to be successful in fundraising and then also obtaining what we need in terms of revenue for the shelter and also just good community engagement and PR in general. Office supplies has gone up. One of the things that James had mentioned in the prior meeting is that our office staff was previously buying supplies from using personal funds. So we want to make sure that they had plenty of money for that. And then staff development also. James wants to make sure that we all want to make sure that our case managers and some other staff get the experience to talk with other staff from other shelters, meet at a conference, see what they're doing at their shelters, and then maybe get some ideas and implement them and just see things from outside of LCS and how it's done and what's standard. So just having the opportunity to kind of invest in our staff and make sure that we have those funding there. I mentioned loan interest earlier, and then the last thing would be that depreciation expense, which is now incorporated into our budget for 2025. So, and I mentioned that I budgeted about 175,000. So that's based on current trends and then what we're going to be adding. So pallet is going to be modification. We have other modifications to the shelter that has a longer depreciable life. The step-up beds will probably be about 5 or 7 years depreciable. So I'm estimating around 175,000. It might be a little bit more, but I feel like that's probably a little bit modest based on we're not going to be capturing a whole year. Pallet's not going to be ready on the 1st. And depreciation expense starts when things are placed in service. So I don't know when we're going to be able to have the funding and purchase the step-up beds. I don't know what the timeline is like on that. But I feel like, again, 175,000 is reasonable.
One other item I was looking for clarification, because I'm always looking to find where we may have expected greater expense and what we're going to see. I look at payroll tax as a proportion of the salaries and wages. What we've got budgeted is a higher proportion than what we've had in the past by a percentage point or two. And it just seems to me that, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that our payroll tax, even with those increases, comes in at $20,000 to $30,000 below what's listed as the expense there. Just because I think it should be a pretty direct relationship to the payroll.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like about 10% right now, and it's historically been less than that.
Yeah.
I ran my projections for this budget for salary through a spreadsheet based on everybody that's on staff and based on everyone that could potentially be on staff. So if we're fully staffed in an ideal world from 1/1 through 12/31 of next year, that's what these numbers are based on. These staffing payroll specific numbers are based on.
Any other questions on that? On the column G, at the bottom, the projected
Oh,
change in net assets, is that accurate? Like the revenue minus expense? Looks like $1 million would be,
it's not, because I don't think that this number is correct. It should
Okay.
be, it shouldn't capture this guy here.
all right, it's it's more contextual information. I was just curious if we're gonna end the year, with our net assets will be higher than they were at the end of last year. It means we're carrying forward some surplus that might also provide a cushion for those revenues that we're kind of concerned about, like if it doesn't come through, we've got money left over from this year that.
Yeah, we've got a
Should help
little
with
bit of a margin to
Right.
recognize what's changed and make
Yeah.
that adjustment.
Is that fair interpretation?
Looks like she's changed it to 8.
Yes,
Yeah.
corrected
Yeah.
the thing, but
Um,
Karen, am I understanding that properly? Like we're projecting that we'll end the year with
a
funds, a
surplus.
surplus that will then, help us with, if our revenue doesn't come in like we think it will be for next year.
I don't think it's accurate to think that way because
Okay.
remember I mentioned that I did include in revenue the funding amendment for 2024 for the pallet 24. So I think that's largely why the revenues minus expenses will have a sub, but that's technically restricted funds.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, when we
And that was
did have
700.
the report for September from Kindred, it seemed like we were showing a year-to-date September income from operations of 330,000. So it's not that million mark,
Mhm.
but there's still a little bit of a
Mhm.
cushion there.
Well, then just, I don't know that this is the year, but at some point we should build a reserve.
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm kind of
You
getting to. is
know?
it Feels like we're actually gonna finally have a little bit of reserve,
Yeah,
and that's a good thing.
what I'm hoping is that with these proposed budgeted expenses, it's one of those, like, I'd rather have it and not need it situations. And in that case, if we don't need it, then yes, that need will go towards building reserve.
All right. Are there any other questions about the budget, or are we ready to take a vote on this, or have a motion on this? Now, I understand if there's big change in the city's portion, we'll be right back to the
Right.
next month.
The only way I'm okay with this budget, because I think it is a best case scenario budget,
Mhm.
which I hope comes true. But is that, if that doesn't happen, that then the expenses are not incurred.
Yeah. Well, I entertain a motion then to approve the 2025 operating budget as presented.
I'll make it.
All right, is there a second?
1 second.
All right, motion made and seconded to adopt the 2025 operating budget as presented. Is there any other discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. You've done a great job doing this. It's a pleasure to work with you. I just have to tell you what I'm thinking and you take it from there. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate this, and I'm excited to be full-time. Very excited.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Next item should be pretty quick. Approval of our 2025 meeting schedule. I went ahead and just drafted using our current kind of format we've been using for Thursdays, except for the last 2 months of the year, where we kind of run into holiday problems. So those will be adjusted to the third Thursdays. And I put that on the second page of our agenda for anybody to look at. If that's acceptable, I'd entertain a motion to approve that as our 2025 meeting schedule.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
all right, motion is made and seconded to approve our 2025 meeting schedule as presented. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. Next item is executive session to conduct the end of year performance review for our executive director. I've placed a draft motion for your consideration. If anybody would like to make the motion.
Well, I have it pulled up, so I will do it. I move that we go into executive session to discuss a matter involving non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319, subpart B1. Justification for the executive session is to protect the privacy interest of the person involved. The board will reconvene in an open meeting room C at, how much time do you?
You're leaving at 6:45.
I'm leaving at 6:45.
Okay.
Shall we say 6:45?
Okay, at 6:45, after the executive session is concluded, no action will be taken during the executive session. Other persons besides the board to be included is James Chisholm.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to go into executive session. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes, executive session. But I would entertain a motion to consider James's pay raise after his performance review. If someone is so inclined.
I move that we approve a $5,000 pay raise for James based on his excellent evaluation, performance review.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
Second,
All right, the motion's been made and seconded to provide James a $5,000 pay raise based on his end of year performance review. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, if there's no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right, thanks, James. Thanks, have a good whatever you're doing. Shannon has to leave.
Thank you. Bye, Shannon.
We still have quorum, there's 4 of us in the room here. So let's move down to reports. And we'll start with the executive director report.
Well, one of the things I was going to talk about was those percentages of our staff that took on the health benefits. I think that's, I was curious to see if having an increase in their wages would cause people to want to buy into the health benefits so we can have provisions for a healthy staff. And I think that has happened. So that's great. I want to talk about weather emergency shelter. Let me pull up my notes. Is John in the room?
No, we're not here tonight.
So we've been working nightly with John to make sure that he knows our up to the moment where we do about hourly census with when we're in weather emergency. Like tonight, I suspect the temperature to drop to about 18 or 19 degrees. So starting at 7 o'clock, I'll text him what our census is. So before we reach our capacity at 145, he would be able to get volunteers in line, let them know that potentially tonight we might need an overflow shelter open if we get to capacity. One of the things that has happened at the shelter, I think our highest has been 141 this month. It doesn't look like it did last year. So one of the things that we didn't never have to open the library for people at 141, we never opened the library for people to sleep in. We got cots from the city, no more mats on the floor. We're doing cots. We have 3 people in Monarch, so we don't have that full. So I really believe when I first started, we were underreporting our numbers. And we've identified that our entry into weather emergency was not being adhered to, we believe, appropriately. And so we're taking a lot of, we're making a lot of changes to ensure that we know exactly who's in our building. What I tell staff, if you don't know the count, that means you really don't know who we have in the building. And it's important that we know who's in the building, no matter what time of year or what the weather is. But it's also important that we have an accurate count so we don't go over capacity, and that we can get another shelter open in time so we can provide life-saving shelter. And so our staff are really apprehensive because they're traumatized from last year because it was not nice with that many people, with a lack of structure and things like that. So the structure we have put in place, it is working, and we see a difference. And so we've been painstakingly making sure that we have enough food in place. We're trying to get staff in place so we can do a better job with weather emergency shelter. So let me see. We've had a total of 89 different people fill out the weather emergency shelter packets, and that's at any time since weather emergency has happened. So we have 89 people that have used the shelter, different people for weather emergency. And that's when times when the temperature was, I hope we don't go over 100. I think it's over 100 in the summer and under 32 in the winter. So a total night by night to date for is 686 people. Total served by the village to date is 132 different people. And total served by our, well, wait a minute. Both of these say the village. I'm gonna say 47 for our not our 90-day program, 47 different people. I don't think that number is right, but that's what I was given. And the total number of people that we've housed out of our programs, either in with emergency shelter, either they've been able to go into permanent housing or to go into assisted living, or any place they've exited other than back into homeless, has been 82 people for the year. So I like that number. So
James, when you're
yes.
giving us numbers for like the counts for each program,
Mhm.
do you have a count of unique?
Those are unique numbers.
No, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but basically, I'm assuming that it's possible for someone to be counted part of the year, maybe in the night by night, and then if they're into the
Okay.
90-day program, are
I
they being
don't-
counted a second
not-
time?
Not across programs. So the number when they're in the program based on that program, and we can run a correlation report to see how many people went from that started in night by night and went to 90-day, but they go back and forth a lot between night by night and the other programs.
Yeah. Well, I'm
but
wondering
they're only
is
going.
if there's a way to figure out a unique count of people served across all spaces.
Okay. What I'll be able to do is say how many people that have been in multiple programs, and we can have 10 people have been in night by night, have been in 90-day, and we can do it that way. Would that help?
I think it'd be interesting because it's another way to think about what's the community need for shelter.
Right.
And
right.
if, you know, if people are, I guess the things that'd be curious for me would be how many people have used shelter services of one kind or another. Anytime in the year, like how long, I mean, it's not the same as length of stay, because I know they might be sporadic in their stay.
Right.
But if there's, like, when I volunteer, like I was there on Sunday. By the way, it was my first Sunday volunteering now that you've let everybody stay in the building on Sunday because of the bus situation. And it was amazing. I mean, there was tons of people to feed, and I thought I'd forgotten that until I got there. And it's like, what? How long is this line today?
It was wonderful, wasn't it? It was so different.
Yeah, a lot
than
of times
last year,
on Sundays, it's like there's only a handful of people because
Right.
they're all moved out. But now that they're able to stay on Sunday, it really changed a lot. And it feels great to feed people.
Right.
But what I was thinking is if I'm seeing some faces, like I've volunteered enough now, I recognize people. And so what I'm curious is, like, over the span of a year, how many unique people are we touching? Whether they spent a few weeks at the village, or they spent, a couple nights and overnight, or the night by night, or they spent maybe 4 months in the 90-day program or something. Like that would be collectively helpful to understand the size of the population that we're serving, and then maybe some information around, like, how many nights are they being served collectively across all programs would be interesting. No hurry on that. I'm just.
Okay. It says somebody just opened the door on my car.
Oh.
I'm sorry for that.
Do you need to attend to that? We can jump down to a different report.
I think it's erroneous because I can look out the window and see the lights not on or anything on my car. But you never know. Well, I never know. Yeah, I can have that. I'll have that shortly because I just have to ask our data person, and she would love to run those numbers to get that information. So I'll be able to do that, and I'll ask her to put it in as many different ways as she thinks is important. And then I'll have that information for you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm kind of distracted here.
I understand.
Okay, so our utilization rate, and these numbers just came out with the city report. that we provide to them. Our utilization rate at the end of November was 83.5, and by mid-November, our utilization rate is at 95.6, and that's with 175 beds. So we're actually staying close to being full in all our programs in December, and that's a good thing. I said this to the executive team today. I said it'll be good thing is when we're not in weather emergency, and we say, hey, we're full today, because that means we have beds for people that need them, but we also know that we're providing services that people want to be in. And that was the thing, that we had all these beds and people didn't want to utilize those beds. Now we can't keep up with the request to be in our programs and to stay in the shelter, even when the weather's fine outside. So I was just discussing how that 30-day program will be a program where people can get to know us, get to know the shelter, and we'll get to know them and what their needs are. So it's a two-way thing. And some of our case managers wanted to know, well, what's the difference between 30-day and 90-day? And the difference would be the expectations are different. In 30-day, it's to give people an opportunity to subside some of the trauma of being unhoused, to be in a safe place, to get meals, to reorient themselves, to decide what they need and what they want to do to address that homeless issue. A lot of people don't get that in night by night. I mean, if you're there for 12 hours, there's nothing I can really do. I'm thinking about what am I going to do tomorrow, not how do I change my life. It's like, where am I going to eat tomorrow? Where am I going to do all those things? And I want people to have an opportunity to develop plans with the help of our case managers. Whatever they need, we will help identify that in 30 days. And this is not for chronically homeless individuals. It's for individuals that this might be their first time homeless. They might have rebelled against their spouse, or whatever reason, they don't have a place to stay, and they want to decide what they need to do. It's hard to do that when you don't know where you're going to eat or sleep or take a shower the next day. And so if we can do that, if we can provide some options for people in a first time or second time homeless, and it's not chronic, we can lessen the chances of it becoming chronic if we can address some of those things now. And so I think that's going to be important to do the 30-day. So that's one of the program improvements that we're going to do.
Is there a date when that's going to begin?
So no, it's contingent upon having the warehouse remodeled and us able to move people into the warehouse. So the pallets are going to go up first. So we need the warehouse to stay just like it is, so we don't have a disruption in how many people we can house. Once the pallets go up out back, we'll be able to start to remodel the inside, where we'll have 48 beds for people to utilize outside. We'll still have access to some of the beds inside that are not being disrupted with the remodeling of that area. And so when it's finished, I told them I don't really envision where we're going to have 48 people out in the pallets out back, because a lot of our people, given the opportunity to be in that 30-day program, are going to say, okay, I want to be in a 30-day. I don't want to leave. And the expectations are not that you have to come all the time, but you have a bed. You can come tonight, you can come next time, and there will be something like 2 unexcused absences or 3 unexcused absences will be considered an exit, or continuous absences, or some way to say, well, you're not utilizing that bed this many times in a row. You haven't talked to us about needing that time away. So we're going to exit you from this program and give somebody else an opportunity. But it will be up to them, and it won't be immediate, because if you live in a house, if I live in my house and I decide to go to Kansas City for the weekend, I don't have to ask anybody. I can just go and come back after 2 days. I want people to experience what being in control of their lives feels like, with still not jeopardizing their safety and security. So if we want people to act like adults, we have to treat them like adults. And with that program, we'll be able to do that. They'll be able to make decisions. And we'll also be able to gauge when somebody appears to be ready and amenable for other programs by what they're asking for and by the way they're responding to being in the shelter. And so and then we'll have a way to say, well, if 30 days wasn't enough, we have another program, which is 90 days. You really seem to want this because you've been engaged in the program, you meet with case management, then you haven't been able to solve those issues. Why don't we look at how you can do that in this other program? So what we're having now is people timing out of 90 days because 90 days is like that program where people don't really get started to day 70, 75. And then they say, hey, I need to get a job. I need to look for a place. And then, well, I need an extension because I'm not able to do that by my exit date. And we do grant those extensions based on case management, how they're working with case management, how they're meeting their goals, and how they're doing some of these things. But once they don't do that, there's no other place for them to go if they do that. They exit and they go back to night by night. I don't like that. So I want them to start at a lower level required program so they can actually move through the system if they need that and they're actually working and it's just not working out for them. That's normal. Things don't always work for people. That doesn't mean they have to lose that safety and security. It means that we need to extend the time we can provide for them so they can meet some of those goals. And getting our staff to kind of see the bigger picture. When I first started, the majority of our staff saw every day the same, people needing that space for that day, and that was it. I want them to start looking at long-term and how exposure to these programs helps people decide that they want something different for themselves. What's better than to say, I like eating 3 times a day, I like waking up and being able to take a shower, I like being warm. And then we're saying, well, it's possible for you to get that for yourself. Here's how we can help you do that. It's not possible saying you got to leave at 7 in the morning. You can come back at 7 in the night. That's like saying, well, if you don't find somewhere to sleep, come on back. Well, nobody's going to be able to do that all the time, every day. So we want to give them opportunities to change. But we also know that some people, that's what they want because of some other things that are going on in their life. A lot of that time, it could be untreated mental health, maybe some addictions, some past trauma. There's a lot of reasons why people are not able to do that. And so we have to start recognizing that. And I think our staff are really seeing how being clinical and talking about people in a way to not what they should be doing, but it's how can we provide them options they don't have now? And that's a big change with the way we're providing services. So I think it's going to start feeling a lot better.
James, you a couple of times have talked about Pallet. Do you have any update on where we are on the Pallet 24?
That's next on my list, Chuck.
All right.
Pallet 24, we are in the point now where our engineers are still finalizing the plans to get building permits before any construction can start. We have to have the permits approved by the city. And once they get the plans finalized, our contractor can start to provide information. They have the plans in front of them looking at potential contractors so they can start bidding on some of the work. The work can't start, but the bidding and those type of things can start based on once the permits come through, the work can start. So that's where we're at now. What was the holdup last week or maybe last week or a week ago was that we were waiting on Evergy to come out and look at our junction box to see where all the electrical can be ran from the back of the building. They had to actually open that up and maybe have to add some extra connections to it to be able to provide that to the pallet. So that's kind of where we're at now.
And then I've got a question associated with Pallet. And I mean, it crosses a couple of different behavior questions, I suppose. The number of people that I've talked to that, you know, whenever I'm interacting with people on the street or that are in encampments, I always want to know why they feel reluctant to utilize the shelter. And probably one of the things I hear quite frequently has to do with dogs. They have a dog that's the most important thing in their life at that point, and the separation factor that comes into play. I'm assuming we don't allow dogs at Pallet Village right now.
No, we don't.
And is there a plausible avenue to allow someone to have live with a pet, or are there just so many problems associated with that it really burdens all the rest of the guests?
Not at the village. We have a hard enough time keeping our facilities flowing for humans. So not at the village, but we never deny anybody for pets at the shelter. And the pallets behind the shelter, you can have pets. You can have your pets there, but not at the village.
So that was a city policy. But the LCS main shelter.
It's on us now, Chuck. It's not the city. We manage it, but there is no viable way to do pets, in my opinion, at the village. But we have an alternative. We have pets at the shelter. You can bring pets to the shelter. When we open Pallet for night by night, you can have pets in night by night. People can have pets there now in night by night. Every program we have at the shelter, pets are welcome. We have a wonderful dog park that's out at the shelter.
Did I hear you right? Then, so it's not the city anymore that's
No.
causing us not to use the pets at the village? Okay.
Nope.
That's new.
Nope.
Okay, but when we're talking about pets at LCS,
Mhm.
and I guess the thing that I'm wondering is, particularly in relation to the new, pallet structures, will someone be able to have their dog staying with them overnight in that pallet?
Yes.
Okay, they don't have to be in a kennel, off to the side of.
It depends. They might have to if they're in there with someone else.
Right.
They will. In the shelter too, on normal days when we're not in weather emergency, they have to be in kennels at night. They don't have to be in kennels during the day. But during the weather emergency, there's so many people and so many other dogs. Dogs have to be muzzled and have to be in the kennel if they're not with their owner. And that's just a safety thing. Dogs like to fight other dogs and they like to bite when they're nervous and things like that. And so far, there's only been one person bit this year, but it happened at the bus stop and it wasn't in the shelter. That doesn't make it better. It's just that there's no way to regulate what pets do at the bus stop. And I don't know. I think he reached down to pet the dog and the dog bit him or bit him on the leg. I'm not sure, but we haven't had any of those incidents in the shelter during this weather emergency, during this winter. But pets are welcome at the shelter. My next on my list is Monarch. We've had a contractor out at Monarch redoing some of those units that were remediated for mold. They actually went through all the other units and the bowing and the ceilings that were there. They replaced the panels. They're replacing wall panels. Right now, we had a dumpster, a roll-off dropped off today, so they can start discarding the trash and material and start the cleanup phase of that. They're on hold right now for materials. The flooring that was used in Monarch, they had to source that material, find a suitable replacement. And I talked to the contractor today. He said it's been hard to find that material, but once they find that, they'll complete that. And the program for Monarch is going to be for high medical needs and high needs period. So there are certain times when we have guests that are deemed beyond our scope because they have so many additional medical, mental, behavioral concerns that they're just beyond our scope because it takes multiple staff to assist them and do those things. And we just can't do that. But now we have a way that working with the HRT team, if they come to us, petition us and say, we're working with so-and-so, they have a need for medical to come in and check on them daily, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. We'll coordinate the case management. We'll coordinate the care. You provide the housing and the food, and we work together collectively to provide housing for those individuals that would not normally receive housing because they're beyond our scope. But we're entering to an agreement with reentry. They asked us if, because they have to write some type of plan for individuals that are recently, that are incarcerated, that are being released, that might have tested positive for TB, and they need a place to isolate. What better place to do that than in Monarch? It has an individual restroom, individual kitchen area, individual showers, and they can isolate with TB. That's from reentry. We're doing that with them. And any other community agency that has someone that has high medical needs, that's unhoused and needs a place for respite, we're going to provide that because that's an unmet need. We currently have 3 people in that program right now that are being served by the MRT team. That's the mobile response team, the HRT team, and LMH and Bird Nash. So they're collectively providing services for people. And it seems to be pretty good. And so we're going to do that with most of the Monarch units. So that's a good thing. Next on my list is to talk about our PEO agency that's coming in, which is Accent. Starting on Sunday would be the first time they're taking over payroll. They'll be responsible for payroll starting Sunday. And we sent messages to them today because I'm like, are they a go? And we got a response back. They're good to go. Everything's on track to start. We already got everybody signed up as an employee through the employee portal. We got people signed up for health benefits for 2025, all other kind of benefits that they've already been exposed to that. And they say they're ready to go. Karen, you have anything you want to add to that one? Because I know you actually are meeting with them regularly.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I think Melanie's going to be meeting with our payroll advocate there to talk about time clocks, but otherwise, I think we're ready to go. We got an email this evening. So yeah, we're good.
Okay, good.
James, I'm just
Yep.
curious, is the payroll approval process going to be changed after, once this goes into place?
I'm not sure. I know that our time approval we have to diligently start watching our time approval. I think the payroll approval, once the time is approved, there'll be a process, but I'm not sure what we've incorporated to do that. I don't know if a lot of that'll be on the board anymore. And Melanie's working that part out.
Okay.
So they haven't said anything, and they're really professional at this. They had a lot of teams come in, they did what they said they were gonna do, and they're giving us the thumbs up that everything's ready to go. So
Okay.
I'm a kind of reluctantly trust that because there's always hiccups in this thing.
Well, I
But
kind of have it on my calendar that
I know.
I'm paying attention to the need to make that approval, but I wasn't sure if they're kind of taking us down a different path and, just keep us up to date about it.
Well, as far as I know, you have one more to do, which will be this one. And then I'll let you know once I know, we'll all know. But I can't see how I can see how to be different with them actually doing the payroll and seeing the time and responsible for that part of it. I don't see why it should be different. If it is, we'll let you know.
Okay. In the financial policies that we approved earlier this year, that was, our role was to have to review and approve those. So if we need to make some changes to that policy, then
Okay.
just bring that to us.
Okay, and I know that's what they're doing. I like when Karen said we talked to what was his name, Steve. He's risk management. Now we have somebody doing risk management for us. That's just amazing. That somebody's going to be there giving us all the advice we need on what they're seeing and what they're suggesting for us. They're going to do that with policy. They're going to do a lot of things that we're excited to actually put into work. That leads me to my next one, which is staffing. We currently have a need to hire more relief staff and just staffing, period. One of the things that happened is during this last year, a lot of our relief staff that were good, they applied for full-time positions and they got full-time positions. So our relief pool is down. We've had some staff turnover, and so we're kind of short on staff, and we've been actively hiring staff as we need them, but and especially for winter, we know we need more staff and we're hiring more staff to do that. So that's going to be done. And then starting at the beginning of next year, we'll start to actually look at the pool of people that we're looking for as DSAs. We already have a case manager for Pilot 24, but we're going to be hiring at least, I think it's either 4 or 5 new DSAs to work Pilot 24 back there, to have at least 2 shifts continuous, because it'll be night by night. It'll just be staffed maybe at the most 12 hours or maybe 15 hours, depending on the carryover from cleaning and things like that. We might have at least 2 shifts. So one of the things I talked about earlier was donations, and we're in the process of working through our turnover and assuming and identifying the duties that are going to be assumed by other staff, so we can stay up to date on our donations. And I like what I was seeing about how we're getting a lot of new donors and we're getting donations coming in. That's pretty good. We actually talked about getting on top of, we talked about our annual report that we're going to do. And we're going to have a lot of that prepared. So when we do get our 2024 audit, we can come in with our annual report within 30 days of having that audit, because that's the audit we want to, those financials we want to go in an annual report. We want them to be the most current one. And since we have that responsibility to have our audit by, was it March for the city? We think we're going to be able to do an annual report in April. I think that's consistent with when annual reports come out. So we're already talking about that. We're doing some proactive planning about how we're going to do better at our reporting and things like that. So it really feels like we're an organization that's actually able to think about the future instead of everything being about what we're doing today and what happened yesterday. We can look further into the future and start to plan ahead of time on some of those things. When I started, there was a lot of things that I didn't know the background to and how everything fit. And now I'm kind of feel more confident that I kind of know what some of the things are. I know what some of the things we need to improve on, and we're actually actively doing that. We talked about a little bit in the budget, but I think it's really important for our staff to actually see that they're not working in a silo. There's other people doing exactly what they're doing and have been successful and have tried some of the things. And what better way to do that is work with case managers that work at homeless shelters. And I know there's a couple of very good conferences that HUD attends. A lot of it's the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They do biannual conferences, one on the West Coast, one always in DC. And I think if we can start to get our staff to attend some of these conferences and get some of that information, it's going to make them feel better about their job. And we'll see a difference in the way they provide the services they provide to our guests. And I think that's really important, the direction I want us to go in. So any questions for me?
That is, last year in January, we did the point in time count, and I'm curious if that's done every year, will be the same time. Will you give us some sense of what the plans are for that?
We have training coming up. I forget when it was. We have training. I know that was sent out for the training. I don't know if the dates are set yet. I know I can have there's going to be a survey in 2025. So that'll always be in January. It's like the third week in January.
Okay.
They have the survey done, but I don't have the dates yet. And I can have that for us I can have it at executive and we can send that out to make sure we know.
Are you
This
gonna
year's
need-
count, I have it right now. This year's count will be conducted on January 23rd. But the date to remember is January 22nd, of course, because that's when they start. If you're homeless this overnight, they do the count on third. Where'd you sleep the night before to identify how people are homeless? So I know we're going to be able to do a shelter count where we do an HMIS count. I'm really confident that we're not going to have to do surveys. They wanted to do that this year because they weren't sure about our data. When I started, we were entering data, but it was pretty sporadic. Now I'm confident that we can do I don't even think we'll have to do a survey count.
Oh, awesome.
We'll be able to do an HMIS count, unless they just want us to. But I think they're really happy with the way we've responded to putting our data in the system and them being able to get that data out. I'm pretty sure we can do a HMIS count this year.
All right.
But I
Well,
I
was
won't
gonna
know
bring-
until they let us know.
Last year I helped out and I know we ran out of donuts very quickly.
Mhm.
So I was gonna suggest we get a little more.
We have food this time. We got a chef this time. We got food, breakfast, bacon.
That's true. Yeah, a lot has
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah, we won't have to worry about food. So,
That's great.
yep.
Any other questions of James? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, James, for your report.
Thank you.
For exec committee, I was just gonna mention that we're gonna, in January, we'll be electing our officers. There's 4 officers. I think we mentioned this in the last meeting when I wasn't available. But I just wanted to, if it wasn't known yet, Shannon and Rebecca both will be in their last year of their term. And they're gonna not, they don't wanna stay on as officers during that last period of their term. Cause the officer term goes beyond the terms end in October, so. So we will be looking for, new officers. I plan to continue, if you guys will accept me, to stay on as the chair, so. But the other 3 positions, secretary, vice chair, and treasurer, would be open, and mine would be open too, obviously, so. But just wanted to plant the seed in case you were not expecting that. There will be a need to find some replacements. I don't think there's anything other than that on the executive committee. All right. Operations committee, anything? Okay, an advisory committee, I don't know, James, anything from your end on the advisory committee? Christina's not here tonight, so,
No, we don't have anything.
okay. All right. So, did you
And
have-
we had all submitted information for bios and things like that as a request of providing a little more transparency or access.
and that is, we're almost there. I just sent another reminder to Rebecca and John. That's
And I
all.
responded, I'm gonna do it tonight.
Okay, yeah, so Bella's been kind of asking me, and then I've been corresponding with you guys. The goal she has is to get it done so we can get it live beginning of the year, so she's trying to wrap it up before Christmas. And we'll get there, and that's also kind of where we approved the public comment policy. And instead of trying to change anything on the current website, kind of waiting for the new one to go live, and then once that's available, we can make sure that process gets put into place. So that's why you haven't seen it yet on our agenda. Any other items from the?
There was something that I had mentioned a while back, and it still is something that I'd like to see if we can achieve. Whether it's at every meeting or maybe once a quarter or something like that. But having a representative from one of what I'm gonna call our allied
Yes, yeah,
agencies, you know, I mean, I see the role of what we do as number one, life-saving.
Yeah.
But being able to provide in some ways a waiting room format for people that are seeking additional help. And that's not, I don't see that as being the role of LCS to actually provide therapeutic or certainly residential care or anything of that sort. And I know there are entities within the Lawrence community, whether that's Bert Nash, whether that's DECA or others that do have those roles. And, you know, I guess I'd like to have some, at some of our meetings to have that information brought to us as a board. How is our work knitting into the work that they're then taking more intensively with some of the guests that we've been sheltering?
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and, you know, we've had, study sessions a few times. I'd like, maybe that's something we need to figure out, how do we make that a more regular thing? I remember during our meeting, after it was like the July meeting, after we did the mid-year performance review. We spent the next meeting kind of looking more broadly, like what have we accomplished, what do we need to do? And there was a particular question around community partnerships, and Misty asserted like, that's really a critical part of her work. And so I think it might make sense to say to Misty, like, what are those partnerships and how does our board become more familiar with what LCS needs to be a good partner with those partners? And she's always been pretty happy to help us with kind of that study session type of thing.
In part of the role that the city's defined for our work is to have a physical capability at whether it's at LCS, whether it's at Howard, to have the ability for agencies to come and have a workspace at our facilities. And, you know, who has availed themselves of that, and who hasn't, and why or why not, and what can we do to make that component of the process more valuable?
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to ask for, and I think she'd be happy to do it, and she's been pretty supportive in the past. So James, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, we are having, we have a list of community partners that come in and actively do groups. We have a group schedule where we do a group a day. So they had the opportunity to
Attention library patrons, the time is 7:30 and the library is closing at 8 p.m.
That's our cue.
We ask any patron needing a library card to come to the accounts desk immediately, since we will stop issuing new cards in 15 minutes. Any children or teens needing help calling for a ride home should go to the children's desk now. Thank you.
I missed that voice. It usually came during my report too. So, so that's somebody that I can ask to, if they want to come and do a report at the board of directors meeting, because we're working with Willow, we're working with the trauma center, we're working with who else is doing Catholic Charities is coming to do groups. There's other groups that we're having. Health department.
I mean, I think you could make this list pretty long, so.
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
it's thinking about what are the ones that would be really helpful for our board to be more familiar with.
Yeah, and I don't think it should happen every meeting.
Okay.
Meeting once a quarter or something like that.
Maybe we can, is that something you can work with Misty on? Cause I'm thinking
Yeah,
that
of course.
she felt, I don't know, this is my interpretation of her reaction that day. It seemed like, I think I had elevated the question around our role, and not our role, actually it was more about your role, James, in developing partnerships, and she was really quick to respond, like, that's kind of the crux of her work. Cause she's seeing it as, you know, she's masterful of all the partnerships across the whole community, trying to get us to all take a appropriate role in working together. So I just want to be careful that we're keeping her perspective on that.
I meet with Misty at least once a week.
Well, maybe if you can have conversation with her about, like, if we were to try to schedule 6 work sessions a year,
Okay,
what would be the 6 most important partnerships for us as a board to be familiar with?
okay,
And especially if it's like high priorities for how we need to, build capacity, so.
Okay.
Would that be a good goal for us?
yeah, I think so.
Chuck's nodding his head, yes. All right, anything else from the board? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. It is 7:32 PM. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening. Thank you.